Okay, so thank you and welcome for tuning in to the Miracle Network. I call this show Out of the Rooms because we're really just spreading a message of hope and inspiration because, we know what it's like to be in the shoes of active addiction, active alcoholism. And I can't be more excited to introduce my guest today. She is a dear, dear friend who really helped me in the beginning stages of my sobriety and showing me actually what I'm trying to accomplish with this show is showing me what the other side looked like. And she just does some amazing stuff. So before I take up all the time, because I could go on and on, Eleni, tell us a bit about yourself and what you're doing right now before we dive into your story.
Absolutely. My name is Eleni. I'm an experiential speaker, a mindset transformation coach, and I'm a best-selling author. I just recently, last year, I believe on this day, launched my very first children's book, all about affirmations, because you know how it is, right? Especially if you're listening to this, you know that the programs run deep and they start early. So if I can do something to plant positive seeds in children, I want to be part of that. I'm available for it. So I get deep fulfillment out of helping people release the shackles of whatever they've been dragging along their whole lives, whether it's trauma or just low self-esteem, low self-worth. So that's why speaking really, really, it lights me up. I love standing on stages and knowing that my message is going out to so many people at once. But there's something magical that happens when you work one-on-one with someone too. Like deep diving, like I love it. I love the way I have a higher power. I call it God. I may say this several times throughout this interview, but I love knowing that God is using me as a vessel to help people find their inner brilliance, their authentic voice, their passion, and to inspire them to don't be afraid, just go for it.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So let's now rewind, right? Let's let our audience know what it was like for you before. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if AA was your first experience with recovery. Let us know what it was like before you even got to that point.
Absolutely. So my sobriety date is November 1st, 2007. And it wasn't a first time win. So it took me 3 years to get that first year. But let's rewind even further than that.
Okay.
Because at 22, I was addicted to drugs. I found myself in a toxic, abusive marriage that literally almost cost me my life. And I ended up homeless, living in my Jeep. And it was living in my Jeep that I decided I would stop doing drugs. Which, the willpower took me for a little while. The willpower carried me. I got sober in my Jeep, focusing on gratitude, starting a gratitude journal and prayer and praying. And I was able to reconnect with my family. I got sober from the hard drugs at that point.
I was going to ask you, if you don't mind me asking, especially nowadays, as you know, fentanyl is
Uh,
everywhere and
yeah,
people are dying at record speeds. Like they're trying it once and they're dead.
yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about like what drugs you were taking at the time?
Sure. I was a cocaine addict, strictly like cocaine and lots of booze to calm down the high. But yeah, so cocaine was my drug of choice. And after that experience in my car of just kind of having a beginning of an awakening, that was the end of that. But at 23, I thought, I could still go out and have drinks. And I remember my mother saying, "Don't you understand? Like you can't do any meal." I'm like, she doesn't know what she's talking about.
Exactly.
And we all know how that road goes. And what it was like, it was morning after morning, waking up like not remembering what I said. Normally very toxic, mean, belligerent to people closest to me, my family, who were there to take me in after living on the streets. And it was ugly. it was just I just felt constant shame. It was a repeating cycle of shame, guilt, and remorse, right? And I, I don't, I think my first experience was a rehab. Like I wanted to go. I wanted to
Oh,
go to rehab because I couldn't stop myself. Like I would try and then I couldn't. So I did. I went to a rehab called the Seabrook House. It was a wonderful place. They recommended going to AA. My dad was sober at the time, so there was support for me. But over the next 5 years, it was a lot of in and out, in and out, in and out. I started to go consistently. So 2007, I would say 2004, I started to take commitments.
okay.
I went through the step work. Can't just sit there and listen to everybody's stories. I went through the step work, and that resentment release was, particularly to myself, was what liberated me. It did take me 3 years to get that first year though. Like I would go for 3 months and I'd relapse, but come right back. I would always come right back. I just didn't give up on myself or the process, because I saw the way other people were living. I saw the way, like, my sponsors and these women were thriving and happy, and I wanted that. And I just wasn't willing to give up. So once I got it, and I continued along a path in AA for a good 6 or 7 years. And then my journey, I felt very solid, and I felt called to serve in another way, to work individually with people, and to kind of get my career up and running. Yeah.
One of the things that always, I believe when I met you, I only had like a year. Like I was just right around that mark. And one of the things, like that baffling thing to me, is you were working as a bartender. Can you tell us about that experience?
Yeah.
Like, to me, that always blew me away.
And yeah, I bartended. I got sober bartending, and people couldn't possibly understand. Like, some people in the program, just discouraged me from it. I formed this belief that I was allergic to alcohol. I was like, I'm allergic to it. I'm
And
allergic
that's the truth.
to it. And I felt empowered by that. Like, I felt empowered. Like, people would be like, oh, I have a drink. I'm like, I don't drink. Like, it was, some people would get like combative with me over it, but it made me feel like a warrior. So it kind of, it made, maybe stroke the ego a little bit. But yeah, I did that. And it showed me the other side though, too. Like, I could see people, who I could see the alcoholics. I could pick them out, and I could see what was happening. I'll share with you a really interesting story.
Yeah.
So my first book had come out that went international bestseller. I was a contributor, a collaborator. So
I remember seeing that.
yeah,
And congratulations.
thank you. That had come out, and now some things were starting to shift. I had been invited to go abroad and speak in London, and opportunities were starting to present themselves, but nothing was like solid that I could leave the bartending. Nothing felt solid. So I prayed. I asked God, why am I here still? And I heard divine love. And it was all I heard. And I'll never forget it, Mignon. I went in for the next shift, and it was a Friday afternoon. And this was like a local corner bar that used to just get mobbed. I was working alone. It was like 3 deep. And there was this woman, and she was just doing shot after shot of Patron, and her tequila hit her Ferrari fast. I mean, it hit her.
Wow.
She just went off on me. I mean, I'm talking MF'd me up and down, called me all kinds of names. And I looked at her with so much love, because I saw myself. And I remember, like, as busy as it was,
Oh, I got the chills.
back, I hit my knees in the liquor storage room, and I prayed for her, because I knew that most likely tomorrow she was going to wake up. She wasn't going to remember most of what she did. She was going to feel physically terrible and be filled with that shame I knew so well. And I just prayed for her, and I loved her. I didn't snap back at her. I didn't, obviously I cut her off, but I didn't, do anything like that. Like, I didn't take it personally,
Yeah. You
and
knew it wasn't about you. It had nothing to do with you.
yeah, but guess what happened? The most miraculous thing. After that, within, I'd say, several days, I was contacted by someone who wanted to invest in my work, my spiritual healing work, because I had been dabbling in helping people heal their bodies through prayer. And a very large investment came through to help to fund me to continue to help people. And I was able to put in my 2 weeks notice. So the divine love made total sense.
Wow, that's powerful. Now, it's interesting because, a lot of AA, I think people think that, outside of the rooms think that like AA is just going to meetings, listening to people's story, let's talk about your day. And what I hear you talking about you doing now really dives into some of the things that we learn in AA.
100%. 100%. AA, if it wasn't for what I learned in AA, I don't think I'd be able to serve as a coach the way that I do. But what AA, the fourth and fifth step work, and for those of you who aren't familiar, it's just going through that, get that inventory and getting really clean on where you need to offer forgiveness in your heart, like for yourself and all the people, institutions, like where are you holding on to this anger, to this resentment, because it really doesn't hurt anybody but you. Like Johnny from the fifth grade is not,
He doesn't even remember you.
It's not, like going through angst because you're still pissed off about this thing that happened. The time he more, humiliated you in front of the class, like that. It's like, and it's just realizing that the only person it's hurting is you. It's actually affecting. I mean, in the work that I do, to dive in a little more, it's like a quantum healer. It's energy in your body, like it's negative energy. So you want to be free from that. You want to get clean from all that. And this was all the stuff that I learned from AA. And it's just sometimes it's not even about ever having to say anything to anybody. It's an inside job. Forgiveness is an inside job.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Because you know what? We're hardest on ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We're hardest on ourselves. Now, you also mentioned, and I don't know if you want to touch on this, is you mentioned that your dad was sober at the time. So did you grow up with like a household where, drugs and alcohol played a role?
Absolutely. I grew up with two cross-addicted alcoholic parents. And my father was probably the most active. My mom, I think that once we were born, she kind of chilled, and she had gone to rehab. I can remember it. I was 4. I remember her going, but and this is where when you deep dive in your own story, you can see where things happen, like abandonment issues. Like for me, my mother just going away. Now I'm here with dad and like my aunts here, like things, these are little things that as children, they form foundational programs that run in us. And it's, going back and cleaning that stuff up and installing new programs, which is really like a big game changer. But for me, like my house never felt safe. So, I have these core programs, or had these core programs that, the world is not safe. I am not safe. I grew up around the alcoholism. I remember my mother telling me, like, you're going to be an alcoholic. Like I'm an alcoholic. Your father's out. Like you just tell, don't ever drink. But it felt like game on. Like I remember her saying that to me, and it's like,
yeah,
no, I'm an alcoholic. But so it's like, part of me wonders, like, how much just expecting to be sick did I like kind of think over and over?
exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, so childhood wasn't like this. There was no fairy tale. It was abusive. There was yelling. There was, all the things that come along with such just low down, dirty alcoholism.
Yeah. And so another thing, what would you tell the alcoholic, the addict who is still suffering in their addiction? They might want to stop. Like, what should they do?
Oh, what should they do? I mean, what I would tell them is it's to love themselves enough to take that first step, to reach out to someone, anyone who can offer some guidance. Like you don't have to do it alone. I think that's the scariest first step, is either admitting that there's a problem. Like a lot of people keep it like a dirty secret, right? Because at the end of my drinking, that's the way it was, because people kind of knew I was trying to be sober, but in and out. But opening up and just being honest about it. Like this is unmanageable. Like look around at your life. It's unmanageable. We're not supposed to feel depressed. We're not supposed to feel like garbage, like we're worthless. We're not supposed to feel hopeless. Like that's not our normal state of being. I believe that as extensions of God's children, that we are supposed to be in resonance with what that is. And what is
Absolutely.
harmony? It's unconditional love. Like we're supposed to be in resonance with that. So if anything contrary is happening, like there's more available for you. So have the courage and just enough self-love to be honest with yourself and talk to someone. There's hotlines, there are meetings happening all the time, everywhere, in the physical, in the virtual. Like there's hotlines, and there's not just Alcoholics or Narcotics Anonymous. There's all kinds of free support. If you don't feel comfortable to tell your family, you will feel just in that first conversation, that admitting, that honesty, a weight just off of you. You and I were having a conversation before we started to record, and this is actually one of my favorite new talking points, and it's about getting uncomfortable.
Yes.
Getting uncomfortable has a really bad rap. Like, I feel like we hear uncomfortable and we give a negative meaning to it. Like, oh, I don't want to be comfortable.
Yeah, that's so true.
Right? So how about we just switch that out with like unfamiliar, right? Uncomfortable.
I love that.
Right? It's unfamiliar. And it's only unfamiliar because it's something new and you haven't done it before. So, talking to someone about problems that maybe you're used to burying stuff. Maybe shame is keeping you. Be willing to get a little uncomfortable, to get a little unfamiliar, to do things a little different. The first time we put our butts up on a bicycle, it felt uncomfortable. After 3 weeks, it felt very comfortable. So that next version of you is on the other side of uncomfortable. But you got to be willing to go there. You got to be willing to dive into the unfamiliar, to walk into the room where that first time opening the doors feels like 10,000 pounds. And sitting in a room full of strangers, you got to be willing to do that, because you keep coming back. It gets easier and easier and easier, and you become a new version of yourself in the process.
Now, you talked about, and my story is like this too, where relapse is definitely a part of my story. What did it take for you to finally say enough is enough?
Honestly, it was. I'll tell you what it was. I know exactly what it was. I got tired of raising my hand, sitting in that room full of my say that I went out again, even though nobody judged me, everyone loved me, but I had enough respect for them and the love that they were shining on me, and I had built enough respect for myself through the work I'd already done in the program, that I was just like, I'm not willing to do this again. Like, it was just enough. And every time I would go out, it would just be like one catastrophe after the other. This one was like, I hadn't drank in almost, I think it was like almost a year. I went out one time, and I hit 2 parked cars in a parking lot, and I dropped my license plate there, so they knew just where to find me. Apparently, there was film footage. I tried to. I'll never. My dad called me because I was living there, and he's like, "Eleni, were you at?" I think it was called Clancy's last time. I'm like, no, I was in the school for massage and everything. I was studying for anatomy with my friends. He's like, Eleni, the township police are here and they have you. And I'm like, snappy. He's like, it's also on video. I'm like, oh, damn. So yeah, I did that. But that, it was like that. Like, it was like, not only putting my hand up, but like my family and just having to feel that way anymore. Like I had gotten a taste of what my new version felt like, and it felt a lot better. Like I didn't like that anymore.
Yeah.
I was unaddicted to that version of myself.
One thing that I also want to ask you about, because I've noticed in the recovery community, and we kind of touched on this as well, about fentanyl being out there and on drugs, and people try it once and that's it, they end their lives. What do you feel like could be done on, like, before these people ever start, before we even start? I don't want to say these people because I'm a part of the community. So before we even start, how do we prevent these kids, adults, whoever, because I don't believe in just say no, because obviously we see where that led our society. like, how do we prevent, or like, what can we do to really help in this area?
Oh, honestly, I have a program that runs in schools, and it's called the Empower Mentor Movement. And
Yeah, I knew I had to ask you this question. I was like, something else I need to ask you.
yeah, and for me, I feel like if we can start, it might not come from home, so it needs to be
Yes.
where children are going. Children are in a brainwave state called theta until they're about 7 years old, and then they're in a more imagination type alpha state until they're about 12. So you've got a nice window there in which everything that children are hearing, they're locking in as programming. So we can start to plant seeds in children to help empower them. But I think with this specifically, it's about learning to value yourself and your voice,
Yeah.
that your voice is important, and valuing yourself enough and recognizing, what your intuition is. With how do we prevent a fentanyl problem? It's giving children enough the power to own their authentic voice, like to respect themselves enough to like unapologetically love themselves. Like, I'm not going to do, like, to feel comfortable and say no, like, no, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
No, but that's
Exactly.
so many children don't feel comfortable saying no. They just follow along because they don't, that fear of rejection, or that whole kind of dynamic. But if you
Absolutely.
raise children who are proud to be who they are, who love themselves, then, and so high self-esteem, using affirmations, all of
Yes.
these different tools that so many people don't learn until they're working with a coach and they're like 35 and on their third divorce and trying to figure out what went wrong. Um,
Divorced, depressed, like all that stuff.
all things are happening. So yeah, so if we can start to plant these seeds now in children when they're young, so it might not come from home. We don't know what's going on at home. So I think it's the responsibility of the school system, of the government, to make these kinds of things mandatory. I don't know the last time I needed to recall the third president of the United States, except for playing Quizzo. But every day I need to handle my emotions and give meaning to the situations happening in my life. So
Every single day.
yeah, a deeper look at like what are we preparing children for?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So you also touched before we got cut off that your brother passed away from fentanyl. Tell us
Yes.
about that experience, because in sobriety, like, you're sober, you're clean, you're living this recovered life, and that happens.
Oh yeah. And it's only because of my strong spiritual foundation that I was able to cruise through it. I mean, I'll give you the whole rundown.
Okay.
My brother and my mother. My brother was addicted to opioids, and he was living with my mother. I mean, he was really like rock bottoming, and I could see it. And I had to. I was at the advice of my sponsor to kind of step back and just love from afar, because I had
Mhm.
done all I could do. And at the point of like my money was being taken advantage of, and
Yeah.
I stepped back. Um, and then my brother and my mother formed a suicide pact, and they taped up their apartment. They got some sort of generators. Now, my brother survived. My mother passed away. And they tried to charge my brother with murdering my mother. So he got put into prison, which, there was notes, neighbors testified. Like, we knew this wasn't the case.
Yes.
So it became my, just my drive to help to get him out of jail. It was a big national news story. There was a lot of
I
media,
remember.
yeah, which was a challenging dynamic when you're grieving. But I was still in the rooms, and I found a lot of
And
support
you
there.
brought him to the rooms.
Brought him to the
That's
rooms.
how our community met him.
Yeah, and but he got nothing will get you sober like sitting in a hole in prison. But they put him in like solitary, and he detoxed that way. And
Yeah.
it takes what it takes, and God's just like, I tried. I said, I sent lots of hands to help, but he ended up getting sober. So fast forward, and he's a very, very successful
Yeah.
the financial world. He's just a good looking guy, beautiful fiance, two small children, and she had an older child. And he decided that he wanted to get like some Percocet, and he reached out to someone, and it was laced with fentanyl. and that's what it took. And so he was actually, I guess, he had some stints with some drinking here and there,
Mhm.
but he had a sponsor. He was involved in the community, and he made that decision, and it cost him his life. I remember, I just remember feeling a little bit angry, like the first day at like God, like why would you have him survive the first time to like make babies that aren't going to have their dad now? I mean, they were 2 or 3 and like 9 months. And
Yeah.
yeah, I couldn't understand that, and I went. I remember, but I knew what to. I just felt called to go to a lake and meditate. I said, "Let me just go sit in silence."
Yeah.
Sat in the silence, and I, I had a moment that, to some this might sound a little strange, but I was visited by the Christ. I was visited by Jesus in my mind, and he showed me a watch, a gold watch. He said, "You were given the gift of time," and he showed me memories that only happened in those 4
Mm.
since my mother, like me holding my niece for the first time, my nephew playing with my daughter, and all of these things never would have happened if Gus would have exited the first time. So it made sense, and I felt such peace from good. I understood.
Yeah.
Um, but that's the thing. You just don't. It's not even like actively reaching out for fentanyl. You just don't know what's in the things that you think you can trust. You just don't know.
Absolutely.
So it's realizing that that happens, and if you're someone who it's dabbles in hard drugs or opioids, like you don't know what you're getting anymore. It's a roll of the dice that could instantly cost you your life. I mean, I'm sure if my brother would have been shown that he would have to leave his children, and like his fiance would be left to do all this on her own, like he would never have made that choice. He would have called his sponsor. He would
Yeah.
have, I don't know why I feel like I need more energy, like, or whatever he was using Percocet for, or he wanted it for.
Absolutely.
He would have
Absolutely.
been. Mhm.
Wow. So how is his family doing now?
Oh, they're wonderful. I just, this was absolutely remarkable. About a year after my brother passes away, my brother's fiance, her best friend, loses her husband. He just passes away of a different, of a more normal, natural cause.
Naturally, yeah.
And she had a small child, and my nephew goes up to her, and he goes, "Don't worry, our dads are together in heaven now." He goes, "All you have to do, I talk to my dad all the time. You just have to close your eyes and put your hand on your heart, and you can talk to them." And I found so much love in that, like to be able,
Wow.
like he feels that connection and that beautiful, just continuum of life, and that he doesn't have to feel that heavy burden of loss. But they're doing well. I mean, I couldn't be more proud of what a strong woman. That God works in interesting ways, and he definitely gave my brother the right kind of fiance. That was part of the story, because she's just done tremendous things, and I couldn't
Wow.
be proud that she's my sister, and what she's done to empower her children.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, Lenny, thank you, thank you, thank you. I cannot thank you enough. I just truly appreciate having you on today, and also part of being a part of my story and helping me see what that recovered life looks like as, we continue to grow, what it looks like being a mother and living the recovered life, what it looks like to just grow as a woman and be successful in society. So I appreciate you. I love you. And I thank you.
Oh, thank you, Mignon, for creating this this needed way to communicate and get the message out there. Just truly showing up to serve and to do God's work. Like God's expressing through you, and He's having a great time doing it. So thank you for allowing that, and letting me be part of it, and all of your guests to experience your absolute beauty and brilliance.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Take care.